All right. Good evening. Thanks for joining in tonight. Hope you enjoyed that song. Hopefully you just sang along with it. I sat here and sang along with it, but I made sure my microphone was off so you would not have to hear me sing along with it. But we are doing our series called The Songs of the Road. Had the wrong slide on there for just a second, but these are the songs of ascent. We're going through them one at a time. Someone asked me this week why I didn't combine some of these because the Psalms are really short. I just think each one is worthy just to be taken on its own and for us to think about it and work our way through it. Hopefully you're reading these Psalms as we go through. They are Psalms 120 through 134. If you would like to read those kind of as we go through, we're going through in order. We're ready for Psalm 124 tonight. So we're just getting started. Got 10 more to go. Hopefully you're enjoying this study. I mean, I'm really enjoying it, just kind of sitting down and reading each one of these Psalms. Again, some of them are very short. The one last week, I think, was only 3 or 4 verses. The one tonight's only 8 verses. But just to take some time to sit down and read those, contemplate on those, take some meditation time with them. I think they're really great Psalms. And again, we're looking at these as the Psalms of Ascent, the Psalm of a Christian journey. The pilgrims sang these, I think, as they journeyed to Jerusalem 3 times a year for the feast. But for us, they reflect not only that journey, but they reflect just the journey that we have as believers in God. And if you jump back to kind of where we started, I called this the road ahead. But, we started with 120. Hopefully you can see this. It's kind of a holy dissatisfaction with where you are. Psalm 121 was help for the journey. Where will I find help? 122 was about the joy of arrival, the joy of being in Jerusalem. 123 was lifting our eyes up to God who continued to give us help. I lift my eyes to the Lord. 124 really just kind of captures on that a little bit and kind of moves us kind of into another spot. In 123, this pilgrim who was journeying to Jerusalem, he was meeting contempt and ridicule from those who didn't understand his journey. They just didn't understand what the journey was all about. And he described those opponents as being proud and arrogant. So in contrast to this pilgrim who is on his journey to Jerusalem to experience the presence of God, those who were ridiculing him, showing him contempt and scorn, the text says they were at ease in the world. I mean, they are content in the world. They think they have the world all figured out. And so to them, this pilgrim's journey doesn't really make any sense. Why journey to Jerusalem for a feast? Why leave your fields and days and weeks of work for a day to worship? Why make a long, treacherous journey to worship an unseen God? And 123, the pilgrim is really kind of looking upward, and in 124 we're going to read tonight, he's looking, or she's looking backwards. And it's kind of interesting to me because if you combine 123 and 124, those two directions, in a lot of ways, it defines a Christian life. I mean, it defines all of our lives, doesn't it? We're either looking forward or behind, or we're just trying to stay right here in the present. But he looks upward into dependence, looking upward to dependence in God in 123. And in 124, he's looking back in gratitude. And I think both of those perspectives are really important because they keep us on they keep us moving forward on this journey to God. We look upward to God for help when we're faced with ridicule, but we also look back and look at how many times God has rescued us. So 123, we're looking for rescue. 124, we're remembering rescue. And remember as we go through these, and we title them Songs for the Road, we're the pilgrim. I mean, we are the ones who are making our journey in Jesus, and I mean, those without faith won't understand. They won't understand our outlook on life. They won't understand our priorities. They'll struggle to understand our faith-based decisions, and they'll struggle to understand our moral standard and the morality that we have in the world. And the problem at the very core is this problem about flesh versus spirit, and we'll see that a little bit as we go through this tonight. But let's read. And I kind of got ahead of where I wanted to be with that for just a second, but just very quickly before we read the psalm, this thing about flesh versus spirit. If you go to 1 Corinthians chapter 2, and it's verse 14. Well, let's just go to 13 right here and read this, and then we'll read 14 with it. It says, "This is what we speak, not in words taught us by human wisdom, but in words taught by the Spirit, expressing spiritual truths in spiritual words. The man without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness to him, and he cannot understand them because they are spiritually discerned." So when we encounter this ridicule, the scorn in the world, that's natural for us as Spirit-led people in a fleshly world, because those of the flesh, those without the Spirit, can't understand the decisions that we're making, or the goals that we have in life, or the purpose that we have in life, or the things in life that we think are important. So in 124, 123, there's contempt and ridicule, but in 124, Psalm 124, it turns from contempt and ridicule into anger and hostility. So the question for us in this psalm is, where do we turn when we encounter anger and hostility? You know, when those in the world are so much against us that it's hostile, where do we turn? Where do we get strength? Where do we get protection? And where do we find our hope? So if we go back to Psalm 124, I want to read that quickly. Usually when I do this on Wednesday night, I read from the New International Version, 1984 edition. Tonight, I am not. Tonight, I'm reading from the New American Standard Bible. I think it's the 1995 edition. Just to let you know why there's just kind of a change. It's a little truer to the Hebrew text, and it's not that the NIV is wrong in any way. The way they translate it is good, but there's something about the New American Standard and something they did here that I like better. And it's this phrase right here. Let me see if I can just highlight it. Soul. The NIV 84 just says we or us, and the New American Standard Bible talks about the stream would have swept over our soul, or the waters would have swept over our soul, or our soul is like a bird that's escaped out of the snare of the trapper. And I just like that better. So because I get to teach the class and I get to choose, I'm reading out of the New American Standard tonight. So let's start with verse 1, Psalm 124. A song of ascents of David. So this is one of the psalms that is attributed to a particular author, and this one is David's. Had it not been the Lord who is on our side, let Israel now say, had it not been the Lord who is on our side, when men rose up against us, they would have swallowed us alive. When their anger was kindled against us, then the waters would have engulfed us. The stream would have swept over our soul. Then the raging waters would have swept over our soul. Blessed be the Lord, who has not given us to be torn by their teeth, or to be prey to their teeth. Our soul has escaped as a bird out of the snare of the trapper. The snare is broken, and we have escaped. Our help is in the name of the Lord, who made heaven and earth. You know, when I was reading that, and it says, okay, this is a Psalm of David, I started thinking just about David's journey. And when he said, had it not been the Lord who was on our side, let Israel now say, talking about the whole nation, had it not been the Lord who was on our side when men rose up against us. And I started thinking, I wonder maybe what David was reflecting on. My first thought, honestly, my first thought was Goliath. When you're first kind of introduced to David after he's anointed, he's at the battlefield. Goliath is defying the armies of God. This story, but we're going to recount it really quickly. Goliath's over 9 feet tall. Everybody's afraid. David shows up. David is not afraid. David, it says even in the battle that David runs toward Goliath. David was a man of great faith and great trust in God, even though at that moment he was probably a young man. You might think like early teenager, maybe a little later as a teenager. But he has no hesitation. He has no fear. And I think I put this on the screen. I don't know if you remember. I don't think I put this up here, but if you remember his words, I'll just read them to you right here. Saul replied, "You are not able to go against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a boy, and he has been fighting from his youth." And the word there is the same. You're only a boy, and he's been fighting since he was a boy. But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep, and when a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by the hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." And Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." And when you read that, you think, why isn't Saul the king going out to fight? Why doesn't he have that same faith in God, that same trust that God is going to deliver them? So I thought maybe David has that in mind. I would almost think it's maybe the lion and the bear as well. But he said in the Psalm 124 in verse 2, when men rose up against us. So maybe he's thinking of a particular time that he was opposed by a group of people. I wonder even the times that after that in the David Saul story that Saul was trying to kill David. And David was he was rescued by God time after time after time. And then, I don't know if you remember this, David went up and he took Jerusalem. And after he took Jerusalem, it says the Philistines came out in war against him. And he defeats the Philistines twice. And, I love these verses because verse 19, when the Philistines are attacking and David is trying to decide whether to go out and fight, it says, I want to highlight it for you. David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go attack the Philistines? Will you hand them over to me?" And God says, "Go, for I will surely hand the Philistines over to you." So David went there and he defeated them. And you're going to see this in the Psalm. Hopefully you saw it when we read it. I'm sorry, we've already read it. This verse 20 right here. So David went to Baal Perazim, and there he defeated them. And he said, "As waters break out, the Lord has broken out against my enemies before me." So that place was called Baal Perazim. So sorry, I didn't mean to get off that quickly. He said, "As the waters break out." But in this psalm, when he's talking about deliverance by God, he said, "They would have swallowed us alive. The waters would have engulfed us, and the stream would have swept over our soul. Then the raging waters would have swept over our soul." But when he describes that in 2 Samuel, he said, "But God broke out like water. God rescued us. God saved us." So maybe he's thinking about maybe the victories he had as he expanded the kingdom, as the United Kingdom grew and expanded under David, and enemies would come to attack, and he would go out and fight against them. There's this idea that God has always protected him. In addition to that, I think about Nehemiah. In the book of Nehemiah, the people are repairing the wall. And as they're repairing the wall, the surrounding nations are ridiculing them. A lot of scorn, a lot of contempt, because they're trying to rebuild Jerusalem. And they threatened to attack the Israelites and Nehemiah to stop the work. And Nehemiah's words were, "Our God will fight for us. Our God will fight for us." So when you get to this psalm and they're going through this section, and it says, okay, if God had not been on our side, what would have happened? I mean, if it weren't God on our side when men rose up against us, what would have happened? And what would have happened, they go on to explain, right? They would have swallowed us alive, especially when it says when their anger was kindled against us, and kind of very literally when their angered against us, right? There's this emphasis on the anger. So when men rose up against us, and they rose up against us with all of this anger. And it reminds me of a couple of other places where David writes something very similar, and probably something we ought to remember pretty often. In Psalm 56, this psalm is about God being merciful. It's when the Philistines. It's one of the psalms that give us the historical circumstance of the psalm. So I don't know if I can make this larger. Let me see what I got going on here. Maybe a little bit. It says, "For the director of the music to the tune of a dove on distant oaks." I wish I knew what that song actually sounded like. "Of David, when the Philistines had seized him in Gath." And so he's praying for God to be merciful, for men are hotly pursuing him. I mean, have you ever felt that way, that wicked and unrighteousness was just pursuing you? And David says in this psalm, in the first verse, all day long they press their attack. But the two things I want to highlight really quick, verse 4 of this psalm, "In God whose word I praise, in God I trust, I will not be afraid. What can mortal man do to me?" And very literally that it says here, what can flesh do to me? If I am protected by God, who's spirit and all powerful, what is it that flesh can do to me? And he repeats that a little on in verse 11, "In God I trust, I will not be afraid. What can man do to me?" So first he writes, what can flesh do to me? And it's a rhetorical question. The obvious answer to that is nothing. And then he says, well, what can man do to me? Well, man can't do anything either. It should remind you, like in Hebrews, this is quoted, the writer of Hebrews says, "We say with confidence, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can man do to me?" And I don't know. Sometimes I just think when the pressures are like really, really pushing on us. I mean, it may not be entire nations who are trying to crush us, and it might not be an army who's trying to oppose us, like it was with David. But there are times in life that we face situations and emergencies, things that just seem they're probably more than we can handle. And so when those things happen, when men rise up against us, when flesh rises up against us, you go back to this Psalm 124, but if God is on your side, then all of these things that could have happened are not the things that are going to happen. I mean, he's on our side and he helps us through those things. Now, sometimes he helps us out of this world into his presence to help us overcome those. But the idea in this psalm is that when men rise up against you in anger or hatred, then God is on your side, and all of these things that could happen, they're not going to engulf us. They're not going to swallow us. You know, this idea that he has, the waters would have engulfed us, the stream would have swept over our soul, the raging waters would have swept over our soul. You know, it's kind of a situation where, like the imagery here is, during the rainy season, the mountain snow melts, and the dry riverbeds in Israel, they quickly become flooded with water and flash floods, and they threaten houses and people. And if you've ever been in a flood, luckily I've never really been in a flood. I've just seen the effects of the flood. You know, even here where we live in Cheatham County years ago, there was a major flood that caused a great amount of damage. And we see on the news major floods and the amount of damage that they can cause. And so he pictures the evil that can happen, that God is protecting us from. Like the waters would have engulfed us had it not been for God. I mean, the waters would have just come and they would just totally, you know, just washed us away completely. You know, and I think about situations where, you know, you kind of stand helpless, and the problem just gets like worse and worse, and you feel like there's no way out, and the more you try to fix it, or the harder you work to try to fix it, the more difficult the situation or the problem becomes, and all of a sudden you find yourself where you're helpless and there's no way to escape. And in this psalm, had it not been for God, that's what our life would have been like. But our life is not like that, because our help comes from the Lord. I can't read that without thinking about this verse in Revelation. I don't want to get into a big Revelation study here, but I want to show you this. I want you to think about it. It's Revelation chapter 12. Just quickly, there's a woman in the dragon. The woman represents, I think, the Israel and also the church. The dragon, I mean, he's identified. He's Satan. And the dragon and Michael and his angels, they all fight. The dragon is cast down to earth, and he pursues the woman who has given birth to the male child, who is Jesus. And so she's given these wings of a great eagle so that she can fly to this place that's prepared for her in the desert, because God is going to keep her safe. God's going to preserve his people. And she's going to be taken away for a time, times and half a time. And maybe we'll go back and study Revelation sometime. We've done it before. But the thing I wanted you to see is the dragon opens his mouth and he spews water like a river to overtake the woman and sweep her away with the flood waters. But the earth opens up, and the earth opens up its mouth and it swallows the river that the dragon, that Satan has spewed out. And you're like, Greg, you're going way off there. It's the imagery that I want you to see. That's who we are. Satan, you know, he is spewing out the river, trying to overcome us. And had it not been for God, he would sweep us away. I mean, we would be washed away in the flood water had it not been for God, who comes to our rescue through Jesus. And think, I mean, just sometimes about where floods in your soul have occurred. I mean, situations that quickly got worse, and you feel like there's no way out. I mean, you don't really have to think any further than your own sin, because there was no hope for you. Satan would have swept you away through sin and rebellion, except for the Lord, who's on our side, who has stepped in to bring rescue to us. So that the psalmist, when he's saying, hey, if the Lord who's on our side, look what would happen if he wasn't on our side. And then he uses this imagery. It's like he's not let us be torn by their teeth. You know, he didn't let us become prey. Think about this sudden attack of persecution, this sudden attack of an army for David or for the pilgrim as he's doing this psalm of ascent. Those that have opposed him, who have stood up against him, who are trying to destroy him because of the faith that he has in God. So there's this sudden attack. Sometimes the biblical picture of that is the sudden attack of persecution. Jeremiah, he compared Babylon to a lion. And Peter compares Satan to a prowling, roaring lion who's just out there and he's seeking someone to devour. I mean, he's like this lion in here. He's like this cunning, sneaky animal and he stalks us and he waits until we relax our guard, and then he just pounces on us. And then there is this imagery in the psalm, but God, he didn't allow us to be their food. Let me see if I can get back. I'm having a hard time getting on the right screen here. He goes to this and he says, "Blessed be the Lord who has not given us to be torn by their teeth." He has not given us to be food for his teeth. So there is this imagery that here is God who is rescuing us and keeping us safe from the wild animals so that we can have victory. And if you just sat in this psalm and you think about all of the ways that had it not been for God, that you would have just been destroyed on this earth by sin and Satan, by those who are ungodly, by those who oppose God. But God, in his power, he steps in. And I love the way he starts to end it, because he says, our soul has escaped as a bird out of a snare of the trapper. And the snare is broken and we've escaped. So imagine yourself like you're stuck in the trap, right? I mean, you're captured. There's no way for you to get out of the trap. And then you're like a bird that's escaped. So like we use the word of God to throw light on our path so we can detect and avoid Satan's traps. I mean, Satan is out there and he's laying trap after trap after trap after trap. And this is a picture of this helpless bird. Just think of a bird. He's just walking down the path. He's landing on the path, just trying to find himself something to eat. He's just looking for some food. Maybe the fowler has put a little food inside the trap, and the bird sees that and he's helpless. He doesn't know any better. And he walks right into that trap, and the trap springs, and now he's caught. And there is no way for that bird to get out. And honestly, that comparison breaks down a little bit, because a lot of times we know the trap, and we step in the trap anyway. So Satan, he has this fascinating bait to offer us, and he is incredibly crafty, tricky spiritual being. And he will find the thing that causes you the greatest problem, or he will find the spot that is your greatest weakness. And he will set that trap out there to snare you, to catch you. And the reality is that he did. I mean, he snared you and he caught you, and you're in the trap, and there's no way for you to get out of the trap. But then the trap becomes broken by the power of Jesus. Looking at this from the Christian perspective, not from the psalmist perspective right now. But God rescues us, and he breaks us free from the trap. The trap is broken, and we didn't break it. Somebody else broke the trap. Right. And the trap is broken so much, even like if you look at the trap like death, people who live in the fear of death, God has broken the trap so much in Jesus that it can't even be used again. I mean, the death the resurrection of Jesus has broken the dominion of sin and death in the world. So we have freedom in Jesus. That's what Paul writes to us. So there's this trap, and Satan has set it for you, and you've gone straight to the trap. Whatever the bait is in the trap, you went straight into the trap and got captured. And you might get in the trap more than once. You may be in the trap again. You may be in the trap in the future, and then God rescues you because of the blood of Jesus. I just want to ask you, when that happens, how do you escape? I mean, when you think about this bird getting out of this trap, man, I can just see this bird. I put him on this picture here. I made AI create that. I mean, that bird is just going to fly away as quickly as he can. And I think he's probably going to fly away with great joy, right? He's going to be excited that he's been released from the trap. I don't know if you've ever trapped anything and unintentionally and then released it and watch the joy that it has as it gets out of the trap. But that's what's happening here. And it's just a simple question. I don't mean to make it a bigger question than it is, but man, do you have any joy in being set free from the trap? I mean, do you have any joy at all that the snare is broken, the trap is broken, that God has redeemed you and released you from the trap, and the joy and the excitement that just fills your soul because you're actually free from something that there is no way for you to gain freedom from? Like, I went to a funeral today, and lady who was a believer in Jesus and faithful, and I didn't preach the funeral. I was just an attendee in the funeral, but I sat and I listened to people talk, and I listened to those who were doing the funeral talk, and talked about the victory that she has in Jesus because death has been conquered. Death is not the final word. I mean, the world may tell us death is the final word. Death is not the final word because of the resurrection of Jesus. And I'm just asking, do you have any joy in that? So the psalmist comes down to the end and he says, look, if it hadn't been the Lord who was on our side, says all of Israel, and if it hadn't been the Lord who was on our side when men rose up against us, then they would have overwhelmed us. They would have swallowed us alive. When in their anger, they angered against us. The floods would have washed us away, but we've been released like a bird from a trap because our help is in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth. It reminds me when I read that. I know we're going a little over tonight, but just bear with me, all right? It reminds me of Paul's words in Romans 8. If God is for us, and I'm down here in verse 31, what shall we say in response to this about God working for the good of us and the justification that we have through Jesus? If God is for us, who can be against us? Like if he who did not spare his own son but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? He will bring any charge against those whom God has chosen. It is God who justifies. Who is he that condemns? Jesus Christ, who died. More than that, he was raised to life, is at the right hand of God, is interceding for us. So who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall trouble or hardship or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or sword? As it is written, for your sake we face death all day long. We are considered as sheep to be slaughtered. No, in all of these things, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. I'm sorry, I didn't have that on the screen. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus. You remember all the way at the very back when we were looking at Psalm 56 at the beginning of the lesson, and David writes, what can flesh do to me? God is for me. What can flesh do to me? If God is for me, what can man do to me? Our help is in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth. And when he rescues us, there is no one who can unrescue us. When he says we are innocent, there is no one who can claim that we are guilty. You know, Satan, his name means a deceiver and an accuser, right? And the accusing part, when Satan brings an accusation against us, that accusation doesn't stick because of Jesus Christ, who died on the cross to forgive our sin. And so when we had it not been the Lord, what would have happened to you? Well, had it not been for the Lord, you would be in sin, hopelessly mired in sin with no way to escape. You would live in fear of physical death. You would have no hope beyond just what happens in your flesh, but Jesus comes and rescues us from that. So had it not been the Lord, so you think through life, man, during an illness, had it not been for the Lord, what would have happened? And I know that even as we say that illnesses take the physical life of people, but God rescues us from that because he rescues us out of a sick body into a resurrected body that knows no sickness. So like during a financial crisis, God is the one who rescues. That doesn't mean he makes it go away. It just means through faith in God, we can figure out our priorities and the things that are important. You know, when we have broken relationships and broken marriages and temptations that we don't really feel that we can overcome, but we really can when we walk through grief. Psalm 124 just teaches believers, those who are journeying to Jerusalem, those of us who are called to God in Christ, his Son, to interpret our lives through God's providence rather than just through coincidence. If the Lord is for us, and so maybe this week you just reflect on that. Had it not been for the Lord, where would you be? Had it not been for the Lord, what storm, what torrent, what flood, what snare, how would you have been swallowed alive had it not been for the Lord who rescued you? And you maintain complete confidence in that because as he finishes the psalm, our help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. And there is no one like him. And when he protects us, when he rescues us, we are truly protected and truly rescued. Hope you enjoyed that. We'll journey on again next week, kind of the road ahead. We're moved from 124 to another psalm that I think is great, 125. I hope you enjoyed the song, by the way, at the beginning of this. I hope you could hear it. Sometimes YouTube cuts off audio. I hope they didn't do that for that. There's another song for next week, so I'll play that next week. Thank you for tuning in. Glad you joined the class tonight and look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great evening.